Greetings, I'm Krystina Muhammad with the National Network View. On tonight's show, our guests Meshawn Siddiq and JayVon Muhammad will comment on the CDC's new vaccination mandate for pregnant women and its future implications. Later in the show, Meshawn Siddiq and JayVon Muhammad will discuss the issue of legalized kidnapping. Lastly on the show, our guests will share their thoughts on Midwives Alliance of North America's MANA, Regulation on Midwives, and the practice of midwifery. Before we get into the top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've recently covered. On yesterday's I Have a Testimony, NNV news anchor Willie Muhammad's guest was Dr. Boyce Watkins, who is a host of his own Black social commentary show and is known by many as the People's Scholar. Dr. Watkins talked about meeting the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the minister's involvement in the New Paradigm Forum, and the relaunch of Muhammad's economic blueprint.
Can you share the first time you heard or when you first actually met the minister? And also, how come, unlike many others, you have not succumbed to the pressure and the fear tactics that people place on Black athletes, Black intellectuals when it comes to associating with the minister? Why is that?
Well, to answer that question first of all, I'm humbled, and I can't even I don't even know how to respond to any comparison between me and Minister Farrakhan. There is no comparison in my view. This man is extraordinary, and I first started to learn about him when I was in college, and right before the Million Man March, and he helped me open my eyes in terms of understanding the complexities of American racism and just what power and strength and manhood really looked like. And so when I got the chance to sit with the minister, it was obviously overwhelming.
NNV news anchor Rosalind Parks sat down with weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call News staff writer, for a tribute to the life and legacy of Dr. Runoko Rashidi, world-renowned scholar, anthropologist, and historian.
Now, what would you say stood out to you most about Dr. Rashidi and his work?
Oh man, Dr. Rashidi is, his example, I would say, is the greatest legacy, because we live in an age, especially with today's technology, where you can get information at the flick of a finger. And, and there's a saying that, it must be true. I saw it on the internet, but as free as the internet is, there's also a lot of falsehood, a lot of information that is not really true and reliable. And his example was the kind of man who went and he searched out the truth based on verifiable evidence, going to the different places of the earth and pulling the information up of our history.
Brian E. Muhammad discussed Israel's continued stoking of war with Iran and its implications as a possible warm-up of a multi-country war.
Brother Brian, why is Israel continuing to stoke the war with Iran?
Well, Israel needs to stay relevant. Israel has a problem. Israel cannot exist without the backing and the full support of the United States. So Israel is trying to stay relevant where it does not lose its so-called benefit, which is to a tune of nearly $4 billion a year, plus loans and military loans and assistance that pushes that figure nearly $5 billion a year of taxpayer money. So Israel as a welfare state has to stay relevant to America.
Brian E. Muhammad also shared his thoughts on the UN General Assembly's creation of a permanent forum for accountability for America's racism against Blacks in America and around the globe.
Currently, there's a Final Call News article entitled World General Assembly Creates a New Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. How will this new platform improve the lives of Black people around the globe?
Well, the UN, as I've been saying earlier, it's a joke. The UN does not have the power. Let me just start off with this. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that justice is not going to come from the courts of this world. It's going to come from the God of justice. The UN is enslaved to the biggest influencer of oppression in the world, which is the United States.
Weekly medical contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad updated us on how states and communities are tracking COVID and its Delta variant infection rates, how the vaccinated have responded, and the effect on the population in general.
What's the reason the scientific community is saying a vaccinated person can transmit the COVID infection?
Well, as you know, there's this one side or the opposite in just about every aspect when we're dealing with health these days. And there are many scientists that are saying that when we are vaccinated and the body starts to produce these spike proteins on the cells, this is happening in just about all the tissues in the body. And so the immune system is having to respond to that reality, meaning that there's work that has to be done in order for these spiked proteins to be produced on so many cells. We're talking about billions or trillions of cells. And so at the same time this activity is going on, here we have the Delta variant coming into this region. So I'm specifically speaking about the United States. And now your body has to fight another variant.
Sister Cherie Muhammad, founder and director of Asiatic Minds Online School, and Sister Iman Ali, meditation instructor, discussed the importance of meditation and why Asiatic Mind School offers meditation classes.
Will Asiatic Minds curriculum offer students the right mix of classes to help them master subjects and improve their overall level of performance and achievement in schools?
Thank you for the question. At Asiatic Minds, what we are striving to do is give more classes and offer more classes other than your basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, as we sometimes call it. So we want to offer classes that are going to help the students enrichment as a whole person. And so we have several classes outside of our math and our traditional classes that will help our students mentally and spiritually. We'll be getting into physically and in other different aspects that will help them to be able to go back to those original or foundational classes and have a better mind to master them.
Brother Born King of Soul Society discussed the organization's youth mentoring and empowerment programs that are helping people tap into the gifts of their soul and lock in on their personal life purpose.
Now, how did Soul Society get started?
So, in a nutshell, I'm gonna give you the long story short. It's like a trilogy movie and everything. So I just give y'all a trailer, But long story short, a major transition in my life. Well, one of the first things was my junior year in high school. We used to have these hotel parties, and long story short, I was arrested for the first time my junior year. Mine was with some weed that I didn't even know was in the environment I was in, but the
way that that process was carried out and that experience was carried out, and the way the cops expressed the intent, you know, to really like take down, you know, young black men. And I mean, they were literally expressing themselves in a way like, dang, this isn't even enough to really do what we would like to do with them.
I was joined by guest commentators, artist and energy healer Sister Malika Phoenix Ali Muhammad and Sister Teresa Muhammad, a traditional birth worker and birth keeper, where we discuss the controversy over comments made by hip-hop artist DaBaby. All right, so last week we witnessed cancel culture, right, at its finest. Do you all think that these cancellations from these festivals and events were necessary? Sister Malika, can you start us off?
You know, I don't think it was necessary at all. I think last week, the controversy with DaBaby is a prime example of how cancel culture has gotten totally out of control. And I think we need to be very, very careful about how we think about these types of things, because it's proof of a further pulling back of our rights of freedom of speech. And although it's very, very popular nowadays to speak out against people with particular sexual preferences and things of that nature, I think it's extremely important that we be very careful about heralding and cheering on this type of cancel culture.
Sister Malika Muhammad and Sister Teresa Muhammad voiced their opinions about Johnson & Johnson targeting Black women with their talcum baby powder products. So tell me, what are your thoughts? Why are so many dangerous products being placed specifically in our communities that they know are toxic and dangerous to our health?
Well, I think that, number one, the fact that we are always the target for the worst products is one aspect. But the other part is that we're the trendsetters. You know, anything that comes into the Black community, period, women tend to be the mass consumers in the Black community. Single mothers dominate, you know, in our homes. So, but we also the trendsetters. So when you put something in front of us, if we like it for any reason, and we market it and we start wearing it, everybody wants to wear it. And it doesn't matter the color that you are. Everyone follows what we do. And that's just the way that it's been, and that's the way that it is.
Sister Malika Muhammad and Sister Teresa Muhammad also shared their thoughts about the family of Henrietta Lacks filing a lawsuit against Big Pharma. Is it possible that other Blacks, in addition to Henrietta Lacks, have cells now commonly known as immortal gene lines that have an amazing property?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. As we know from the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that the Black man is the original man. So our cells are these immortal cells. That is who we are. So absolutely, I have no doubt. I mean, you hear these sorts of things all the time, not only Henrietta Lacks, but you hear about aborted fetal cells being utilized in the cosmetics industry and all this. And this is the reason why, and we all know the data or the statistics about, you know, unfortunately, this issue of abortion in our communities, but a majority of those aborted fetal cells are African American or Black women who are releasing their children.
Let us pause for announcements from our sponsors. Coming up, our guests, Sister JayVon Muhammad and Sister Meshawn Siddiq, will speak on the CDC's update vaccination suggestions for pregnant women. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
Just last week, the Center for Disease Control released new recommendations based on new data from approximately 2,500 pregnant women. The CDC is now strongly recommending that pregnant women get the COVID-19 vaccination.
While the CDC officially now has updated its guidance to recommend pregnant women do get vaccinated against coronavirus. The CDC previously had a neutral stance on whether immunization was safe for pregnant women. Now the agency says there is no increased risk of miscarriage among those who have been vaccinated. CDC has found pregnant women are more likely to get severely ill from COVID than non-pregnant ones.
Joining us to discuss this is Sister JayVon Muhammad and Sister Meshawn Siddiq. Welcome, sisters. Peace and love. Super excited to have this conversation. So let's jump right into it. So now we saw that there's some new recommendations. Now with the Delta variant on the rise, what does this new strong recommendation from the CDC and ACOG, for those who may not know what ACOG is, that's the American College of Gynecology. What does this mean for pregnant women? Sister JayVon, can you start us off?
I can. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Glad to see you. And I just want to simply say that this is not new. The COVID, this Delta variant, this COVID virus and pandemic, this is fairly new for us. But vaccination during pregnancy is not. And most midwives I know and myself don't recommend any vaccines during pregnancy when we're not in a COVID pandemic. So think about that. And those are so-called studied vaccines. But when we talk about the COVID vaccine, we don't know enough. The CDC can make a recommendation, ACOG can make a recommendation, but the simple truth is we don't know enough about what will happen in adults and some teenage people or children who are not who are vaccinated yet. So I would not recommend the COVID vaccination for pregnant women. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody, but particularly pregnant women. The decision to use an experimental vaccination or gene therapy, as some say, in your body while carrying a baby, I want to keep everything very simple. Like, we have to think that out. Many of us are concerned about taking the vaccine as adults. But now when you put a child in the picture, it's not smart. A newborn baby, it's not smart. We don't have enough information.
Right. So, Sister Meshawn, what is your opinion on this? What do you think this means for pregnant women, especially as a public health professional?
I really agree with Sister JayVon on the points that she brought out, that it's really experimental. And I have a problem with how they are coercing the people by saying that 2,500 pregnant women was studied. And when I looked at the study, it's 2,500 women or birthing people that was pregnant, less than 20 weeks pregnant. So they didn't even see the duration of the pregnancy of things that could have happened. And to say that 13% of them had miscarriages and that they're comparing it to the national average of 11 to 16%. To me, that's not justification to actually recommend a vaccine. And everything else that Sister JayVon said, it's just not enough data to give people informed decisions. You're coercing them, and they don't even give the comparison of what's happening. They just said that it's an increased risk of deaths or adverse damages for women who get COVID while they're pregnant, but they don't show the data. What is the data that shows that they can compare it to? I think that is a threat or a scare tactic that they're actually utilizing, and people need to base it off of their personal choices and what's best for their fetus, and this is not best for their fetus.
Thank you. So, with that being said, for women that are currently pregnant, I'm sorry. Did you say something?
Something I could tell if I was muted.
Go ahead, add it.
We're experiencing extreme psychological warfare, and data can be manipulated. As a person who has led FQHCs for almost a decade, I remember late 2020 when we were having Pfizer and Moderna calls in preparation for bringing the vaccine into the FQHCs, and pregnant women were discussed at the time. And at that time, they said over and over, we don't have enough information, but the benefit outweighs the risk. But we still think that pregnant women would benefit from being vaccinated. This was back in late 2020. So now that we've been put into a hysteria, of course, it's going to be safer in the words and the eyes of the CDC and pretty much the world, because, you know, the community has pressured people pregnant and not to be vaccinated. So we just have to remember that data can be manipulated. It has always been manipulated, particularly when you look at our health outcomes. And we, again, just don't have enough information to make a good decision about vaccinating any person at this time, let alone pregnant people.
Just one quick addition to what Sister JayVon is saying, and I think both of us are saying that, are thinking that we're not, just because we're in opposition of the vaccine, we're not in opposition of prevention. There are so many other things that pregnant women should be doing other than vaccinating themselves. What we do injustice to our women in this country, mostly in this country, but around the world, is that we continue to put them in public. We make them work until they have the baby and after they have the baby. Women should be at home. They should not be in the space with all of the hazards that are out there. So we don't recommend the vaccine, but we also strongly recommend some of those other preventive measures that can prevent her from getting COVID and transmitting it to her family.
Yes, and I love where this conversation is going, because we need this, right? So now that we have these recommendations for pregnant and nursing women, okay, so for our pregnant women that are receiving prenatal care in the hospital or any of these federally qualified institutions, could this potentially become a situation where they may be required to be vaccinated to receive care? Sister JayVon?
I don't want to put it past, the government and the people. I don't want to put it past, because we're seeing mandates come up in New York. I live in San Francisco, and, we need COVID cards to go eat at many places. So I wouldn't put it past the government, the way things are going. My daughter is expecting now, and although she's planning a home birth, she goes to a clinic for care, and they put extreme pressure on her last week. So we're headed that way in all aspects of society. In California, they recently set a standard. I don't want to call it a law, but you cannot visit anyone in the hospital. You cannot go in the hospital anymore unless you've been vaccinated, or you can show a negative COVID test within the last 48 to 72 hours. So everything's headed that way. You can't even visit a relative anymore in the hospital.
Right. So, Sister Meshawn, what are some things that pregnant and nursing women can do to protect themselves from COVID-19, since we do see ourselves potentially going into the space where vaccinations will become mandatory?
Well, I think that beyond protecting themselves from COVID, women need to be educated. I think we rely too much on our doctors to give us the information. That individuals need to be educated on the entire birthing process from conception into 1 year postpartum. Now, as far as the standards or what we recommend to prevent COVID is wearing your mask, staying home as much as possible, ordering food at home and getting it delivered. So staying away from crowded places, masking up, social distancing, and just shutting in, staying home during this time. That's the best prevention that they can use at this particular time, as well as doing things to build their immune systems, immune builders, eating right, exercising, all of those things that we should normally do when there's not a COVID pandemic to protect ourselves from any disease.
Right. Thank you. So before we close out, last year, we witnessed a surge of home births due to the uncertainties of birthing in the hospitals because of this pandemic. So now we're facing even more uncertainties. So should home birth be the best viable option for pregnant women and those considering becoming pregnant? Sister JayVon?
Yes. Yes, I am a midwife, and I'm going to forever advocate for home birth or birth center birth for low risk women or women with healthy pregnancies. I think it becomes life and death when you raise the level a little bit and we specify Black women. We have to get out of the hospitals. We do not have good outcomes if we are not sick or experiencing a risky pregnancy. There's no reason for us to go to the hospital. We just need qualified care. And there are so many benefits outside of a physical, healthy birth that come from home birth. So many when we look at support and other things.
Thank you. And for those women who would still like to make birthing in the hospital their first option, because there are women who feel safer in the hospital, Sister Meshawn, can you shed some light on what they should expect and how they can navigate?
Well, again, it's about education. I love that the pandemic really highlighted the need for, or the option for home birth. And like Sister JayVon said, it can be very qualified care providers can do this for the person. But in the hospital setting, it's just so many risks now. They change, or conditions that change overnight. One day you can go in there with your partner or a husband, and the next day you can't. So knowing all of the risks out there, although they can go, it's just too much of a risk, I would say, without weighing your options. So women need to look at what their options are. Home birth is an option for low-risk individuals, like Sister JayVon said. But going in the hospital, you have to wear a mask. You have to be tested for COVID. And some hospitals, like Sister JayVon said with her daughter, that they're strongly encouraging you to get that COVID vaccine. And so you may be coerced to do that. And some of I've also heard stories of where they want the births to happen quickly. And so that's where that medical intervention might happen. So if you're thinking you're going to have a unmedicated birth at the hospital, it may end up being a C-section or something that you might not want because of the environment that they're in.
Thank you so much, ladies. So let us pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, our guests will speak about Saisha Mercado and how her children and other children are legally kidnapped by CPS. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Saisha Mercado, singer who took third place at American Idol 13 years ago, is now in the fight of her life as she and her partner Tyrone Dearney are fighting to regain custody of their 13-month-old son after bringing him to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in Florida in late February. Authorities has now seized the couple's newborn daughter just a few days ago.
I refuse to let my story be unseen and unheard.
In late February, Mercado and her partner, Tyrone Denner, says they brought their then 13-month-old son, Amin-Ra, to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital.
I'm a breastfeeding mother who recently found out that I was pregnant and my milk supply went down.
Mercado says her son was having a hard time transitioning from breastfeeding to bottle and solid foods.
I was met with a lot of judgment and accusations that literally just started to spiral out of control.
The family says hospital staff suggested a B12 shot.
That process in the time of our son being in the hospital, it wasn't a welcoming experience.
They say they asked for more information, but instead were met by law enforcement and investigators with Manatee County Child Protective Services.
Never could I have imagined going to that specific hospital to get help for my child, but walking away without my child.
Investigators say doctors called after concerns over Amin-Ra's failing health.
Welcome back, ladies. Okay, so as we watch Saisha and her partner Tyrone go through such a difficult situation, which is extraordinarily heartbreaking, we know that this happens to Black families every day. Having their children taken under the guise of medical neglect. Can you both share with us what is considered medical neglect? Sister JayVon, can you start us off?
Yeah. Well, I would say that the people who are making the rules define medical neglect. And the challenge is that our culture is not respected and it's never been considered. If you are Black in the United States, the expectation is that you follow the guidance, the rules, and the policies of the white community, even if they conflict with our own. I remember being in the hospital, working in the hospital, and seeing the first time I saw a court order be issued for a woman who did not want a cesarean section. Our choices are being taken from us. I mean, they always have, but we have moments where we, think we're getting closer to options, but it's not, it's false. The only way we can practice a healthy culture that frees us is to remove ourselves from systems that didn't start oppressing us yesterday, but they have been doing this for some time. CPS has been weaponized against Black families since its conception, particularly during and right after the crack epidemic era. So I couldn't say enough how important it is that we consider pulling ourselves out of the system. We could say, I could give you many examples about the school system. We can't control anymore what our children learn in school, what they hear, what they do, what they see on TV, what they see on the radio. This is just an extension of that. We have to start removing our children from these systems that represent death. And one way to do that is to start out with home birth. Midwives work with families to make sure that they can realize the options that make sense to their family. In that situation, the sister could have been supported, counsel, and recommendations made. But she also has a right to a belief system that is not really endangering her child, but may look different to the greater system.
Right. Thank you. And Sister Meshawn, what is your perspective on what is considered medical neglect?
I'm not a clinician, so I'm glad Sister JayVon started it. But what I wanted to highlight is that they asked for more information. And so if an individual asks for more information, they're not denying that the professional or the so-called professional has the information. They need to make an informed decision. And she also said that she was faced with judgment. And I find that in the research that women, babies, Black babies are dying not because they're not eating the right foods, it's because of systemic racism. And if, like Sister JayVon said, if they would have been counseled. So I think that whatever the standard is for neglect, that information should have been given to her so that her and her husband could have made the right decision. But I can't agree with Sister JayVon anymore.
Yes. So on that same note, Sister JayVon, can you inform us as to why would a child need a B12 shot?
So I guess that they were suggesting that the baby was malnourished, that lacking vitamins, right? Sometimes you'll hear about adults taking vitamin B for energy or nutrients. And so without knowing everything about this situation, I would say that that same thing happens when moms don't want to choose vitamin K shots. Like there are many times the system documents your denial of a service. And so again, I want to really be general because this happens so much. We're talking about vitamin B, which is a vitamin, right? We could fix that in this situation, but this happens across the board in so many situations. We cannot, sometimes they judge you because you breastfeed your baby to a year. We really can't get it right because, again, the person who makes the rules, right, controls it. Medical neglect can be used against us because of culture, and it is often. So you would think that medical neglect was risking the life of your baby, harming the care. But when you have a culture that doesn't understand your culture, how can you prove that? Like, how do we free ourselves from these people? But when we bring our babies, we bring ourselves to them. I could go on and on about that.
Yes, ma'am. So what we know about Saisha and Tyrone's situation is that when she found out she was pregnant, her milk supply had decreased. And she claimed that she went to a lactation specialist and a pediatrician before taking him to the hospital. Sister Meshawn, as a CLC, how does a 13-month-old become malnourished? And what guidance would you offer to mothers who are in similar predicaments where maybe their milk supply is decreasing?
Like we do, again, have to generalize, but in this situation, we have to understand the history of what's going on in that family. What's the diet like? What things has she done? So understanding the culture or just even the daily lifestyle of that family. So we can be malnourished. Some of us are vitamin D deficient. So it's no like step by step, oh, this is what they did wrong so that the child probably was malnourished. But I think what should have happened is that she should have been counseled. And sometimes we turn patients away because we don't take in consideration their lifestyle. Our eyes go a certain way because they are vegan or because they are Muslim or whatever. We put some type of stereotype on that individual and make assumptions. But I think what probably didn't happen is that the individual didn't take into consideration the goals of that family. Sometimes we say, oh, it's 1 year old, so the baby should be eating all of this stuff. But if the family decided not to, so what can we do in place of? Like, for example, for a person that's a vegetarian, some physicians might want them to get protein. So, okay, you're going to be a vegetarian. Have you considered beans? Have you considered this? So I don't know what their lifestyle was or what the records show, the medical records, but I think it can be all sorts of things that can lead to malnourishment.
Yes, and as being public health professionals, How can families avoid situations such as these? Sister JayVon, I know you had said, just don't even be in their system. Don't birth in it. Stay home and birth. But when parents find themselves at the ER, what do you think they can do to avoid situations like this? Sister JayVon?
I think they have to stand their ground and we have to support them. Another thing is that we don't support families in these situations when they're struggling, and we have to come to their defense and, in that moment, but we also have to create policy that supports, Black family and Black culture. And we're in this Black Lives Matter movement, this time period when we're talking a lot about racism and culture. And part of that work is to create policy that supports our way of life. We can have a separate culture than the white man. So, you might come into an emergency situation and you have to go into the hospital, but we need to go in unity and we have to have support.
Yes, Sister Meshawn, how do you think that families can avoid situations like this?
Well, being prepared, I don't know why the sister decided to take her child to the emergency room, but we need to have a community of support. So I wonder what support did she have? Did she have a Black pediatrician that believed in her way of lifestyle or supported her lifestyle? So if you have to take your child to the emergency room or even birth in a hospital, whatever the case might be, understanding your rights, never separating yourself from the child, and understanding at any point you can decide to separate that relationship with that provider, the hospital. So if they're not doing things to help you and your family, then you can decide not to do it. But also understanding what an actual emergency is. If it's a true emergency situation, you want them to be there to save your child's life.
Right. And one of the things I want to highlight from this particular topic is that in the CDC's, in their statement of the vaccination, in terms of them making this recommendation for pregnant and nursing women, they are suggesting that when women take these vaccines, that it is good for the fetus and good for the nursing baby. If women refuse this COVID-19 vaccination, can it turn into a similar situation as we witnessed with Saisha? Sister Meshawn, can you start us off?
Yeah, we don't know where they can go with it. None of us probably would have thought, like I live in the New Orleans area, none of us could have thought that it would be required to take a vaccine or to show a negative test to get into places, to eat and to gyms and fitness centers, but we're here at that time now. So we don't know where they're going to go with it. We just have to follow what the studies are. And then also we can't, separation is the key. If we want to have a life that protects our families, then we have to create that lifestyle for ourselves and protect our families.
Yes, thank you. Sister JayVon, are we looking at a similar situation with this vaccine?
I think so. And I think that the proof is that they are now trying to rush the FDA approval. And so, it's like, oh, y'all keep saying we waiting on FDA approval. Let's rush it. We haven't done that before, but we're going to do it now. There's a method to the madness.
And thank you so much, sister. So we're going to pause for some announcements from our sponsors. After the break, our guests will return to talk about the Black maternal health crisis and how it can be solved. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App, and.the News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "Separate and Be Saved. America's race problems and deadly race interactions are growing worse. It is time we leave the children of our former slave masters and 400-year-old tormentors. Separation from whites is the only and best solution to this problem, a serious problem that is rooted in prophecy." This FCM Volume Number 41 edition middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is entitled, "A Case for Separation." To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call cover report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
At the height of the coronavirus pandemic, we were inundated with Black maternal mortality statistics that reveal that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during pregnancy and postpartum phase than their white counterparts. These studies also revealed that Black women and their babies had better birth outcomes when cared for by Black birth workers.
In the United States, women of color face disproportionately high maternal mortality rates. Black women alone are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than non-Hispanic white women, and twice as likely to lose an infant before their first birthday. But why is that? While there is no one factor, experts say racism, discrimination, bias, and exclusion are driving forces.
I think that we are really hobbled by systems and institutions that have racist policies, procedures, and yet we are not really willing to dismantle.
Living in America as a Black woman does something to your body. It can be everything from I feel that I'm treated differently to I am being discriminated by the police in housing and in my workplace. Those have a physical effect on the body.
According to the CDC, 60% of pregnancy-related deaths are preventable.
Welcome back, sisters. Okay, so let's get started because we got a short period of time. So, the Midwives Alliance of North America, also known as MANA's President Dr. Sarita Bennett, has recently received a lot of flack for attempting to pass regulations that will remove autonomy from certified professional midwives. Sister JayVon, can you educate us on what a midwife is and why is it vital for them to have autonomy?
Sure. There are several types of midwives. There's not just one type. So one type is a midwife who becomes a nurse first, called a nurse midwife, and then gets advanced training. And then there are CPMs, LMs, direct entry midwives they enter into midwifery and have specific midwifery training without being nurses. There's another called a certified midwife, who is also a direct entry midwife, but recognized by the credentialing board for certified nurse midwife. So there are many types of midwives, but though we're right now regulated differently. Nurse midwives are very close knit with physicians because they work together. Nurse midwives are the midwives that deliver primarily in the hospital. They work in the physician practices. So they're very closely knit with the traditional Western medical system. Not that so you might call them, many are known as mini doctors, right? Not that they want to be, but because they have to operate under the protocol of the physician because they're attached to that physician's license, right? Or the supervision, I will say. So in many places, certified nurse midwives operate under physicians. They're called their supervising provider. They can do what the physician has allowed them to do. We know over on the CPM, LM direct entry side that is not what it's going to take to improve the health of Black women, right? Like, we're not going to improve pregnancy outcomes if we're attached to the same system that is creating these outcomes, right? We want to practice community, grassroots, direct entry midwifery, that kind we know about, where aunties come and support, the mama, where we all gather around the house, where you eat what you want, where you feel comfortable, where we are trying to create a different reality and environment for our mamas, right? We don't do interventions if we don't have to, if they're not medically necessary. You won't catch us talking about an induction or Pitocin, or if we want to work on a real grassroots, healthy, natural level. And we cannot do that if we are operating under supervising physicians. There are two ways we learn, and the way the doctors learn contradicts the philosophy that midwives learn under, that pregnancy is a normal part of a woman's life. Like, we have childbearing years, right? That the years we're more likely to conceive. And so we know that happens for us. And we're not sick. This is fantastic. We're celebrating. We're talking about health. We're talking about all of the things we talked about as alternatives to the COVID vaccine. So we can't do those things under physician. It is. I don't even know what she's thinking and why she would take us back. Because the part I neglected to say is that CPMs do not operate with supervising physicians, and we're out here in the community, in people's homes, doing good work. So why she would want us to take a step back when we're in a crisis, I can't. I don't understand.
Right. Well, apparently neither does many of the group doesn't understand. So now that we covered that, right? So what can birth workers do to protect themselves from a system that is really aiming to restrict them? Is now the time to separate? Sister Meshawn, can you start us off?
Definitely it's time to separate. Well, the other thing I just want to add to what's certified professional midwives have been proven, like, there's data to support that they have great outcomes, not good, but great outcomes. And so in protecting ourselves, I heard, maybe Sister JayVon said it, that we have enough doulas. We need more Black midwives. We have to have trained professionals out there that can go and that can provide that great care. So is it time to separate? Definitely. It's time that we train our girls to be midwives so that we can deliver our babies, our cousins' babies, our sisters' babies, and give them that great quality care that's delivered in a way that's free of racism, free of sexism, all of that, and free of capitalism, because it doesn't cost as much money when we take care of ourselves.
Yes, thank you. And I want to get to this last question because we are short on time. But knowing the history of obstetrics, and many of us, those who did not know, came across how treacherous it is this past year. What do you think mothers need to expect when birthing in the hospital? Because we will still have mothers who want to birth in those spaces. Sister JayVon?
We need to expect rushed births. We need to understand that hospitals treat a lot of people. So even though we want to be seen as individuals, that doesn't often happen. So there's a cookie cutter way to have a baby in the hospital, and that is what's going to happen. And so when we go in with these other expectations, we're usually disappointed. We have to bring a team that keeps us away from the cascade toward a cesarean section, because that is what you experience in the hospital.
Yes, thank you so much, ladies, for joining me for this most important conversation. Hopefully we can continue this conversation because people need to know more about the maternal health crisis, or just how can we better our birth outcomes. So thank you all for joining me. All right, so and now thank you all for joining us today and tuning into the National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Krystina Muhammad with National News Network. Peace.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.